Hi, thanks for clicking on this video. We're here at Trinity Wesleyan Church so that we can unleash hope to those around us, and that includes you. So thank you for being a part of what's going on in our church, even through technology. We hope that this video is a blessing to you, and at the end, you're going to see some next steps and ways that you can get involved even after this video is done.
Christmas. It's the season of lights, laughter, and, of course, sweaters. The uglier, the better. But sometimes, life feels like those sweaters. Not what we wanted. Not what we asked for. We all have ideas of how life should look, of the perfect gifts we think we need. But what if the true gifts aren't the ones on our list? What if God, in His wisdom, knows just what our hearts need? Ugly Christmas Sweaters, a journey into discovering how God's gifts, even the ones we didn't ask for, might just be the most beautiful of all.
Think of the ugliest Christmas sweater you can think of. You didn't want to be caught dead wearing one of these, but now it's part of every great Christmas party and Christmas morning. Getting a Christmas sweater doesn't sound like the best gift that you can get, but people that bought these items for somebody else had a couple things in mind. Number one, it's warm in the winter months. That's very good to have. Number two, it's festive for the season, but they get a lot of hate, and many older ladies would wear them. It was not the fashion statement people wanted to make, but what makes it ugly? What makes it funny? What makes it memorable? Here's some of my favorite noteworthy ugly Christmas sweaters. First, we have the quintessential ugly Christmas sweater. It looks like it was taken from a thrift store and made with quilts. The second one is this one. It has Jesus' birthday boy. Very fitting for the season. Very fitting tribute, I guess. The second one it says get lit as a Christmas tree. Just a classic play on words. For the sports person in your life, it says ho ho hike with Santa hiking the football. What's better than that around the Christmas season? If you like the puns, you can even go with something that has puns. Meowie Christmas. You can also go to something that is more shiny, I guess, with one that's covered in tinsel. Or if you have a lot of friends and you want to do it with community, you can have one that 4 people can fit inside of. Or you have the one that is cats that are attacking a Christmas tree. These are something that you did not ask for, but you came to love for its meaning and practicality. Life often brings things that we don't expect. There are often things we cannot control, but we have to live with them and heal from the pain. As you get older, you become thankful for those difficulties and you wouldn't expect in life. You start to see those events as something you wouldn't ever change from your life. We don't like life's Christmas sweaters, but ultimately we need them in our lives. It isn't what we wanted, but it's what we needed for that time. Christmas sweaters are often like the first Christmas. If you go back to the Christmas story in the Bible, nothing goes to plan for the people involved in the situation. Their rental donkey didn't show up. Their hotel plans didn't work out. They didn't have their OBGYN doctor set up when they got to Bethlehem. Not just the actual plans of what was going on, but it didn't look like the first Christmas people were thinking how it was going to happen. As we go through this ugly Christmas sweater series, we will be going through specific aspects of the first Christmas that people were wanting one thing, they were expecting something but received something different. Many times in life we expect God to show up in one way and that's what we want. And when it doesn't come in the way that we thought it would, there becomes friction in our relationship with God. I remember I had multiple surgeries to fix an injury about 9 or 10 years ago. This first surgery, they said it had a 25% chance of fixing the problem. I did not like those odds, but the surgeon said that the surgery had to be tried before any other surgeries could be done because it was not as invasive and it allowed for an easier recovery. I mean, sounds really fun, right? It was not fun. I stood up after the surgery in the recovery room and I was supposed to be heading home. And as soon as I stood up, some of the stitches opened up and I started bleeding on the floor. And that's not a sight you like to see after you're confused and you're groggy and you thought this was going to fix everything. So a couple months later, that surgery did not work and it didn't fix the issue. So I was scheduled at Mayo Clinic to see one of the top doctors in the country to fix the problem. It took a long time to get into Mayo Clinic. It took about 4 or 5 months. I was at a conference in Billings, Montana, and the issue came back with a vengeance. I called my doctor at Mayo Clinic, and they said I need to come in for a surgery to bypass the issue until I could get into a longer surgery a couple months later. So we had to drive 6 hours to where we were, from Billings, Montana to where we lived in Sturgis, South Dakota to pick up extra clothes, then had to drive an extra 9 hours to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So we get there, the surgery went fine, the recovery was brutal until I figured out how to manage the pain. So I was praying during the recovery period and after the second surgery, and God told me I would be healed. I put words in God's mouth, though. God said I would be healed, but I assumed that God was saying I wouldn't have to go through the final surgery, the third surgery. So as time is getting closer to the last surgery, I was not healed. Nothing happened. It was still the same issue. The problem was still there. It was the night before the surgery, and I laid in the hotel bed all night praying that God would heal me, and He said He would heal me, so I'm banking on God's promises. I never fell asleep that night, and as I walked into the hospital for the surgery that was supposed to take 4 hours and have at least 6 weeks of recovery at home in a chair, I was anxious as a cat in the presence of a large dog. I was shaking, I was skittish. I walked in, I was hoping to say, "You're healed, no need for surgery." And I'd go back to the hotel and I'd sleep knowing the miracle that God did for me. And I was even going to evangelize to the doctors and the nurses, proclaiming the goodness of God. But those jerk doctors and nurses got me all hooked up to the machines, and I kept waiting for God to make the miracle happen. They had to give me a shot for my anxiety because they couldn't even get the IV in my hand. So I went under for the surgery, and I woke up having gone through the 4-hour surgery, and I was confused why God didn't heal me. It took a couple months after the surgery and recovery to understand that I was in the wrong. I put words in God's mouth saying that I wouldn't need surgery. God healed me through the intelligence He gave the doctors and nurses. And it wasn't in the way that I thought it was going to happen. I wish I could tell you that I had a good attitude the whole way through the process that was from about 18 months from beginning to end for healing. But I can't. I didn't have a good attitude. I questioned God. I questioned His purpose. I questioned why this would happen. I became discouraged and wanted to stop following God. I tried to quit following God. I tried to throw my Bible away, and the Bible would not go into the trash can. I was so frustrated. I slammed it into the trash can, but it shot back out, and I was like, okay. But I laid crying on the floor, still questioning God. I knew God was real, but it was hard to trust Him because I assumed that the healing was only going to come one way. Those in the Bible had trouble reconciling what God told them and had promised other people throughout the Bible. They thought Jesus was going to enter the world in a certain way, but that way never came to be. We go back to the Old Testament before we get into the Christmas story because there's a lot to understand before what was going on before Jesus was on earth. So we're going to be in Isaiah chapter 9 for a while. Before we read this story, we have to know a couple things. The book of Isaiah focuses on a person named Isaiah. Who would have thunk it? This person, Isaiah, was one of the prophets in Israel about 600 years before Jesus' birth. So God is giving information to someone 600 years before Jesus. Imagine that with me. God gave information to someone 600 years before it would actually come to be. Our predictions nowadays are far off from what people thought even 100 years ago. People in the early 1900s thought that we would only eat capsules that contained all of the ingredients we needed. They thought we wouldn't be eating regular food. They thought that there would be no more smoke from factories. They believed that no one would have teeth because all of our food would become so soft. They thought that with the invention of automobiles, horses would go extinct. They believed that 75 years old, 100 years from then, would seem young. They thought that there would be world peace. They thought that everyone would be flying to work. Those things didn't happen like they predicted. It's hard to predict the future. The fact that Isaiah predicted these things 600 years before Jesus is a miracle. But the fact that Isaiah was given these prophecies and they came to be true is a testament to God's plan. So when we read this passage from Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 1, think of this in the light of God giving information to a prophet, a human, and that human trusted God enough to speak it to other people. It says, "Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and in the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he would honor Galilee and the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." Isaiah's words were to those who were in Israel, but is also a prophecy for the rest of humanity 600 years later. But those living in that time of Isaiah, they were in a dark time. They had no hope. So these words are partially for them and partially as a promise for the earth. The people in darkness were those who were living in the land that Isaiah was in. Isaiah was speaking to the darkness that was currently plaguing the people. It was a rough time in Israel, but there was about to be a change. It wasn't how they thought it was going to be. It wasn't when they thought it was going to be. They expected a king. They expected a man to come in and take over kingdoms, but that did not happen. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, it says, "For to us a child is born." This is a prophecy for the future. "To us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." This is God's promise through Isaiah, a prophet who followed God, and nothing happened. They're expecting somebody to come, and the government will be on his shoulders, and everything is going to hinge on this person. And nothing happened. Imagine someone promising you something, but it didn't happen for 600 years. I would start to think after 600 years that person is lying and they're not actually going to do what they said they're going to do. 600 years. Nothing really happened. But then all of a sudden, 600 years later, we get to Luke chapter 2, verse 10. "But the angel said to them, 'Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord.' A voice spoke up in the darkness, a messenger from the Lord. It was one who continued the promise of what was to come. Wait, a child being born? I thought we're getting a king. Somebody who's the government is going to rest upon. But babies need to be nurtured. They need to be taken care of. That doesn't seem very kingly. They have been waiting 600 years and God gave them a baby instead of a king. It's not what they thought was going to happen. But Jesus came into the world not as a powerful king, as people expected, but as a humble baby, showing that God's greatest gift is not power or dominance, but love and redemption. So here's what they expected. The historical context is that the Jews were oppressed under Roman rule. They're longing for a Messiah who would overthrow the Roman Empire. God's people went through terrible trials throughout history, and they wanted it to be over with swiftly. It did not happen like that. That's the historical context. What the humans expected, they envisioned a political leader, a warrior king like David who would establish an earthly kingdom. They were longing for someone who would change everything, and no kingdom could stand against the kingdom that the Messiah was going to set up. They wanted it like the person, King David, who people made songs about. Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed 10,000. That's what they wanted. That's what they expected. They wanted a king like that. But how often do we come to God expecting him to fix our external circumstances? How often do we come to God expecting him to fix our external circumstances? We want God to come in and shake everything up and fix everything immediately, and we get frustrated when it doesn't go how God said it was going to go. It didn't go how we told God how to fix our life. Jesus doesn't really promise to fix external circumstances. It is a byproduct of what happens when you follow Jesus. He focuses on the eternal impact, not the external, rather than these earthly mindsets. If we are focusing on God to change what we want and change everything to fix our plan, we are not following God, but a genie. Following God means surrendering to his plan. So after Jesus grew up and began his ministry, he states in John chapter 18, verse 36, he says, "My kingdom is not of this world." Again, still people, after all these years, people are still expecting, now that Jesus is doing ministry, he's going to come in and tear down the Roman Empire. Okay, he was a baby and we can't expect him to do what we're expecting then. But now he's an adult. And Jesus states, he says, "My kingdom is not of this world." Jesus never came to set up physical kingdoms on earth, but to bring the spiritual kingdom of God to earth. People were expecting kingdoms, but God never promised that. It didn't come how people expected. Here's what they received. They received the humility of a baby. Jesus entered the world not in a palace, but in a manger. Again, this wasn't the triumphal entry a king should have. Like when there's a new baby in the royal family, like we expect that kind of pomp and circumstance and all these different things. Jesus was born in what would be a modern day garage and laid in a feeding trough for animals. He needed to be taken care of. It's not what we think the Messiah deserved. It's not what those who were waiting on the Messiah thought he would come as. His birth story reveals God's heart for the lowly and the ordinary. It was the heart of his mission on earth. It wasn't about rubbing elbows with the elite class and the religious leaders. It was about those that everyone had forgotten about. They received the power of love. Instead of Jesus using force, he came as a baby. Instead of using force, Jesus brought salvation through sacrifice, demonstrating that true power lies in love, humility, and grace. Jesus didn't put all of his oppressors into jail or into slavery, and he didn't come to slaughter them, but he came as a baby and he came as a servant. He did not come as a king to be served, but to serve others. They received an unexpected Savior. If you look at your children or you see a baby, if you don't have kids, you don't look at them thinking like, this baby's going to grow up and die for people. That is not a natural way of thinking, but this child would grow to change the world not by taking lives, but giving his own. I love those videos where people wrap presents into things that doesn't seem like what you would actually get. Like there's this one of a cat that is wrapped in gift wrap. It looks like a cat, but it turns out it's an iPhone shaped with a lot of cardboard that looks like a cat. Like these presents, Jesus was an unexpected gift. A baby doesn't look like the solution to oppression, yet through Jesus, God addressed humanity's greatest need, redemption. This is what this means for us today. God knows exactly what we truly need. Like the ugly sweater, what God gives may not align with our wants, but it fulfills our deepest needs. What are you needing right now? Ask yourself right now, what am I needing right now? Now ask God, in what ways am I thinking wrong? What am I thinking that instead of saying, what do I need? You're saying, what do I want? What do I want the best outcome to be? Ask God, in what ways am I thinking wrong about how it will come about? How do we receive what God offers? Do we cling to our expectations or do we trust in His wisdom? This is the true spirit of Christmas. Instead of focusing on external appearances, on material gifts, let's celebrate the gift of love and salvation. It isn't supposed to come easy. It isn't supposed to be how you thought it would be. The Christmas story is a messy story, but it holds the key to life and freedom in Jesus. It brings us back to God. The Christmas season is meant to bring you back to God. It is meant to challenge your thinking and help you become to a better understanding of God's plan, even if it's not in the way you thought it would be. Ask yourself these questions as you go home. Am I holding on to expectations of how God should work in my life? So how can we embrace the unexpected gifts this holiday season, this Christmas season? Take some time this week to reflect on the unexpected gifts God has given you. Write them down, thank God for them, because figure out the other side. What would you not have learned? How would you not have grown if God just gave it to you in the way that you thought it was going to happen? This week, show love in unexpected ways to those people around you, much like Jesus did. Recommit to trusting God's plan even when it doesn't look like the way you thought it would. Perhaps the sweater eventually became a treasured item, not because it was beautiful, but because of the love it represented. And Jesus is the ultimate ugly sweater gift. It's unexpected, unconventional, but exactly what we needed. Ugly Christmas sweaters used to be something no one wanted, but now they're the life of the party. Everyone loves to see the craziest ones, the funny ones. Like ugly sweaters, Jesus was someone who no one wanted because of his appearance as a baby. But now they seek out Jesus because he gives life. Everyone wants to see the craziest stories, from difficulties to triumph. What made your life ugly? What makes it relatable? What makes it memorable? Because this is your testimony from the life's ugliness that other people go through. This is your testimony that that it is God's gift to those around you. Your testimony is a gift to other people. So don't just hold on to the gift that you got other people. Trust in God's provision and see this Christmas season as a time to embrace his unexpected, life-changing gift.